will never give up. We will never back down. We will never, ever surrender. My fellow Americans, our movement is far from over. In fact, our fight has only just begun.
Donald Trump, well, for his reaction to and assessment of Mr. Trump's rally, I'm joined now by the Republican strategist Erol Morkoc. Thank you very much indeed, Erol, for joining us. So would it be fair to describe this as the payback rally? Because Mr. Trump spent a lot of time denouncing his political enemies and laying out plans about how he can defeat them. How he would show them that he should really be in power in Washington and get rid of the people who've hurt him politically.
You know, I think that despite the fact that we wouldn't call it a payback rally, that's a very fair way to transcribe President Trump's opinions. Certainly, he feels wronged by the Republican establishment. He feels wronged by quite a few individuals who perhaps he thought were allies. And now he is on a little bit of a path, because 2022 is where we have the midterm elections. And it's going to be a Republican victory in the House. Everybody's predicting pretty confidently. And it's going to be important for President Trump to make sure that the people who replace those rhinos, Republicans in name only, those people are people who align with his agenda. However, he also does have a very strong bid for the reelection. I was there in Orlando with him when he basically unofficially announced it. And he's dropped every hint he could, basically has said that he is going to run. And he's a man who feels that he's been cheated, and his supporters feel that he's been cheated. And payback it's a dirty word if you use it the wrong way. I think he's trying to right the wrongs that he saw had been inflicted on the American people and the American voter, as he brings up about how he feels the election was stolen. Now, I'm not here to tell you that they didn't get the numbers and the ballots. That's a whole different story than where are those ballots from? Are they auditable? And that's what's going on right now. So I think Donald Trump has sort of kicked off, and I'll use your term, a revenge tour, a payback tour. But certainly to his supporters and to people like myself, we just see it as a return to taking back the White House in 2024 and getting on the right page.
Well, of course, the bizarre thing about all this, Errol, is the fact that those allegations about fraudulent elections are still that, just bogus allegations. No evidence. I mean, there were dozens of cases that were put before the courts, and virtually all of them were dismissed because there simply wasn't any evidence to support the allegations.
Certainly, the way that the American election system is structured, it doesn't surprise anybody that the instant challenges were rejected. That was more political gamesmanship than anything. However, what's going on is more important. It's an audit of these ballots. So we concede Joe Biden is president. Congratulations. Now, can you please show us the ballots with the signatures? Can you please show us what your voting procedures are? So when he's a candidate and he's using terms like stolen election and these sort of things, I'm the first person to admit that that's how you reach out to a broad audience. But the subtext of what's going on is a complete overhaul of the U.S. election system. And part and parcel of that would be making sure the Democrat Party, who has been trying to federalize the election system, doesn't achieve that, because certainly people who have nothing to hide shouldn't be afraid of an audit, and certainly people who trust that the states have free and fair elections, which the Democrat Party has claimed to say, wouldn't want to federalize that. So there's two sides of it. If the other party is very afraid of changes to voting laws and try to castigate them as racist or restrictive, which is completely false. You saw in Georgia, they had the new voting restrictions. They took the big Major League Baseball game from Georgia, moved it to Denver. Denver has even more restrictions. There's a lot of misinformation about what's going on, and Donald Trump uses these broad brushes to paint things, which probably doesn't do any favors in the the media or intelligentsia community. But again, he's a candidate running for election. He's not exactly here to let's say explain the nuance of what's going on behind. So that's the disconnect between what he's saying and what's going on behind the scenes, which is a very serious situation, and hope something that we intend to get to the bottom of. So the 2020 elections, and of course the next presidential election, is conducted without this mass flux of mail-in ballots and unaccounted for signatures. And so that's what he's referring to when he still speaks about fraud.
let's move away from all that stuff about electoral fraud and so on, because I mean it's neither here nor there, as they say. Let's go to the rally itself and the way that it came across. I mean, Mr. Trump, clearly in his element, absolutely loves being in front of a crowd in particular, and one that seems to be adoring.
Yeah, I mean that's the Donald Trump experience. Certainly, I believe, and everybody believes, that Donald Trump enjoys doing that. I think that if you didn't have that campaigning part of the procedure, he's definitely not a bureaucrat, so he wouldn't have been elected in any sort of procedural way. So the rallies, those kind of things, that's how he reaches his base. He enjoys it. He's beyond being a tremendously successful billionaire businessman. He's also a reality TV show superstar, and he understands sort of the power of the media. So getting back in his element, where he can, throw some hats to the crowd and make his bombastic comments, and the crowd goes nuts and they love it. There's a lot of back and forth with the crowd there. He says something, they give him what he wants, he gives it back. It's almost like he can be an MC to his own political base. And granted, the majority of Trump voters aren't going to rallies per se, but they enjoy watching them at home. And there's an element of entertainment that the American people perhaps have missed in the first couple hundred days of Joe Biden's presidency. And I think Donald Trump, back in that element, is really able to galvanize his base and remind the American people that he's still forced to be contended with, and not to
I would agree with you, Errol, that a lot of things he said certainly came across as going down well with the crowd. But I mean, you're a Republican strategist. How representative do you think these supporters of the rally are of the Republican Party today, the supporters who were at the rally?
It's a great question, and I think that they're very supportive. The people you saw there weren't the sort of types of crazies that stormed the Capitol that they tried to say represents our party, which fully condemnable. These are patriotic Americans, people from all walks of life. When you see the crowd there, you see the general voting bloc of the Republican Party, and people. I'll grant this: the Republicans like to put on the hats and wave the flags and do a little bit more of the nationalism that is perhaps uncouth in European countries or whatnot. But certainly they do represent the Trump supporter, the Trump base. And Trump and myself are very proud to have such passionate people. Keep in mind, over 500 media outlets applied for credentials to get into that rally. 25,000 some people showed up. I mean, this is good metrics on anybody's scale. And just to be very clear, those people represent our party. They're good Americans. They're patriots, and they came out to show their political support, just like Democrats or anybody else who wishes to do so.
But of course, for him to return to the White House, which is what the issue is now, whether he's going to do that and what might stand in his way, Mr. Trump has to have a majority of voters support him. We're not just talking about people who attend his rallies or people who like to watch him on television at home. He's got to have real voters. And right now, according to the latest polls, only 1 in 3 adults across the US think that Mr. Trump should return to Washington as president. I mean, so he certainly has a lot of obstacles to overcome.
Well, it depends on how you look at that. I mean, 2 in 3 adults are the only ones who vote in America. So you could say 1 in 2 voting adults. Well, that's not how statistics work, but you know what I'm trying to say. Essentially, yes, he needs to have the majority, but he needs to have the majority of the voters in the states that he's going to win, the Electoral College. So he needs to get the majority back in places like Michigan, places like Pennsylvania, and he wins the election. North Carolina, and he wins the election. What anybody in California thinks, or what anybody in New York thinks, is basically irrelevant just for our party, just like what anybody in Texas thinks is irrelevant to the Democrat Party. Not actually, but when it comes to counting votes. So Donald Trump needs to shore up his base in the states that he lost, the states that he had won and had to swing back to. And keep in mind, the biggest demographic he lost that he had a control over was white men. White men in 2016 went for Donald Trump in much greater numbers than they did in 2020. So he certainly has a challenge cut out for him. He didn't ingratiate himself to many people with his bombastic style on the way out, But then you look at other metrics, other polls, and it shows that there's a strong support for Donald Trump, with the exception of Ron DeSantis, who quite beloved in the Republican Party. So again, I think that base building and that coalition that he needs to build in the swing states is what he is doing. And if it's 1 in 3 Americans who only think he should run, I mean, that's about just enough to win an election in America.
That's it. That's an interesting analysis. The other thing, of course, is that, I mean, I'm not American, and I'm certainly not in America, but I mean, I'm not sure from the analysis that we're looking at whether or not Americans will be in the mood to go through what they went through in 2020 again, about all the stuff about election fraud and all the, you know, attack on the Capitol. I'm not saying that bit is going to happen again, but that kind of thing. But I mean, again, you're a Republican strategist. How serious do you think Donald Trump is about another presidential campaign beyond his supporters wanting him to run, and what might stand in the way of that, assuming he wants to do it again?
Well, I think that he's dead serious about running. And one thing, just very briefly, keep in mind when he won in 2016, the establishment, Hillary Clinton, everybody called it a fake election and started a resistance against him. So it's not as though anything fresh is going to come in 2024, except perhaps there won't be massive rioting and looting and a virus that came from China that has, you know, infected the country. I do believe that his biggest obstacle in running is going to be perhaps age. He might decide that, you know, it's just not for him, and he could decide to be a kingmaker in some respects, to use that term. Maybe he would tap somebody like Secretary of State Mike Pompeo or Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida. But right now, if I was to give an honest opinion, he is dead set on retaking the White House. He's, you know, healthier than he's ever been in a long time. He's got more energy. He's in good spirits. He took some time off. He was a, you know, dedicated civil servant for those 4 years, and I think that it's in his desire and purview and voters' wish to see him return. So I expect to see him as the leading the ticket in 2024, despite whatever obstacles coming his way.
Eric, it's always a Errol, sorry, not Eric. It's always a pleasure talking with you. Thank you very much indeed. Erol Morkoc, the Republican strategist there. And you're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our